Hello, everybody. So, today I want to talk about this question of whether in society we can actually live peacefully. And this has been kind of in my head because, I think about the fact that in society we need law, we need rules, we need order to survive, and not only, well, not really to survive, but to be able to live in a society, to live among our peers and different types of people with different types of beliefs and different types of behavior, right? For example, when someone is bad, like if someone kills, if someone steals, if someone lies, there are different means, right? Different laws or rules that you can do, different norms that you can apply. Like there are social norms where you can basically make the person feel bad, exclude the person, right? Like if they're a liar, you can't really like send them to jail. There are like legal norms, right? There are these types of norms. You learn that in law, for example. And so the first point that I wanted to touch here was basically let's go all the way back to the primitive and savages. So the primitive people and the savages way back when, we haven't really ever lived in an individualistic society as such, or in an individualistic organization as such. There have always been groups of people, right? I think nowadays it's just with cities especially, and with like the global tendency that we have now to think of, all of us being like interconnected, especially with technology. I think it's just gotten bigger, more complex. So like the rules that could apply to smaller groups like cities, like think about international law. Like how do you even go about that when you have different cultures, different ways of thinking, different ways of doing things, right? So if we start with the primitive cultures or the primitive savages organizations, the barbarians, let's say, you have a lot of different, you have norms within those cultures, right? But in those type of cultures, it was really survival of the fittest, right? Like you had to be the strongest. The way in which you applied the rules and the law was with brute force, right? Like if someone misbehaved, you could basically like kill them, right? That's why they say those type of cultures are like savage cultures, right? So we develop into more political organizations, which are the ones we have nowadays, right? With the governments in different countries, and even the international government. So these political organizations, I think, kind of developed naturally. I mean, I think the Romans and the Greeks had these type of political organizations too, with like lawyers and administrators running the game. But I think a big factor here, a contributing factor to the development of these political organizations and government institutions, were is capital. Right now, capital is very interesting because it's like basically property, right? It's the potential to make money. That's your capital. And in order to protect your capital from the bad people, you need to be able to have the government support you, right? Like with contracts, with legal obligations and such, right? So I think thanks to capital, you kind of develop these organizations, these political organizations, right? Which we all know the most common one, and the one that we all supposedly go by, is the capitalist, right? And communism is a reaction to capitalism. It's like, well, in capitalist societies, there's injustice. So, how about let's all just get everything equal? Let's all have, let's have a utopia. And that's communism. But the problem with communism is that it falls prey to the same things, right? Like, since we're humans and we're all after that money, there's also injustices. There's not really a way to organize, society with these state regulated, for example, governments, right? So there has to be a free market. But the problem with the free market is also that there are still bad people, right? There's still crooks, there's still corrupt politicians, there's still corrupt businessmen, etc. So this is not to say that everybody's bad. I don't want to take a pessimistic perspective here, but some people are bad, and that's why we have rules and laws. Now, that's a question. Do we need to have rules and laws because there are bad guys? Or is the answer something else? For example, integration, right? I was reading this and I came across this. I think it was on Eric Erickson's biography, where he says something about the development of the stages that he mentions. But I thought about this in what I've been thinking about, and I said, oh, is the answer integration? Like avoid exclusion. Maybe people are bad not because they want to be bad, but because they feel they're not a part of the system, right? So maybe the best way to make people be good is by integrating them, right? But just how much integration? Because integration leads to a voice, which leads to power. So there are people that could potentially just be naturally bad. Like think about the rebel groups that are trying to take over, like rebellious groups in different countries under different government institutions where I guess there's rebel groups all over the world. In every country you have rebellions or rebellious groups that are trying to like overthrow the government, right? They don't agree with the government. So those type of people, what would happen if you integrated them and you said, okay, you can be a part of this, you can be, you can have a voice, you can have certain power, but would they stop there? Would they try to, achieve more power and just become basically what they're fighting? Because that's what happens in a revolution. If you notice, a rebellious group takes over, they overthrow the government, right? The current government, and once they're in power, they become that same corrupt government, right? And then there's another rebellious group that tries to overthrow it. They get into power, and then they become corrupt, and it's just a cycle, right? So that's where they probably say that power corrupts. But I also have another idea, one final idea, which I think I believe it's all in the family set culture. By set, I'm trying to I'm trying to basically think about the different ways in which people specifically parents bring up their children, right? Like different ways of upbringing. Sorry, yeah, not bringing up. Yeah, basically like the way in which you raise children, right? So their upbringing. Um, so I think here, I've always thought about this. Like in order for you to be a parent, you should have a license. Like you have a license to drive. You should have a program to be able to to be able to be a parent, so you can transmit the correct ideals, the correct values. But obviously, that would come in conflict with, for example, the freedom for you to be able to raise your children however you please, right? Which I think is kind of a problem, but it would also be a problem to have such a program, because then that would be criticized of being authoritarian, fascist, right? There are some cultural ideas nowadays that kind of say, hey, like don't be bad, like don't use violence, don't be a brute, like be tolerant, be patient, be respectful, which I think are good, are beneficial for everybody. But the last thing I want to mention here is trust. I think trust is, and I forgot where I heard this, but I heard somewhere that trust is the real currency for a thriving society, right? Like in the United States, let's say. In the United States, trust is the currency, right? Like if someone tells you they're gonna do something, they do it, and you can trust that that person will do it. In third world countries, it's much harder for people to trust people, right? Like I'm watching right now the series John Adams with the actor Paul Giamatti, and I'm just on the second episode, but they have just declared their independence, the United States. So this is back in July of 1776, and just the way in which those guys thought, right? Because I think before that we were all kind of still pretty much living like savages. And if you think about it, the United States, or the 13 colonies back in 1776, were under the British rule. But many colonies were under the British rule. How come the United States, or the 13 colonies, were the ones to declare their independence? And I think it's because they were able to think like the British, speak the language of the British, right? They spoke English. They had the cultural influence of the English. So it was kind of like taking Englishmen and basically oppressing them, right? And then you come out with these like wonderful ideas for humanity, right? Like, let me just read the preamble to the Declaration of Independence, right? It says, "We hold these truths to be self evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness," right? That's from the Declaration of Independence. So these guys saw that we have certain rights that cannot be violated, right? Like the pursuit of like the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? So I think these ideas, they were very revolutionary for those times. And the United States kind of paved the way on moral virtue throughout the next 200 years, right? Which leads up to today, and how we basically view the world and how it should be and how we shouldn't be bad, right? Yet there are still bad people, right? So this just got me thinking about a lot of things like, can we actually live in a peaceful society where people genuinely try to be good? They don't try to mess up. They don't try to fight. They don't try to use violence. They don't try to do bad things. Is that possible? Let me know in the comments. I think it is, but I also think that we have to work a lot with trust, right? Like develop trust. There are probably many other things, but I think trust is very key in a culture. A culture needs to trust its people. If it doesn't trust the people within its own culture, how is it even going to be able to trust people beyond its culture, right? So I think it starts with the family, with the culture, and then with the international community. So let me know what you think. That's all I got for this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.